Welcome back to another episode of BHAW Radio. This is episode 53. I'm your host, Brian Rowan, and we got a special co-host tonight. We got Phil Simpson on board for this episode with former head coach of the Army Wrestling program, Chuck Barbee. Welcome to the show, Chuck.
Hey, Brian. Hey, Phil. Good to see you guys again. It's been a long time.
It has. We were actually, before you came on, Phil and I were talking. We're like, man, it's like, when's the last time you talked to Chuck or saw Chuck? And Phil was saying, he's like, man, I saw him like 5 years ago at this something. You can tell that, Phil, but
yeah, I think it was the All-Star duel they had in Atlanta. They had a few of the All-Star people came back, and I didn't know you were going to be there, so it was a nice surprise to run into you down there. So
yeah, you and your wife, I think I remember. We met there. Right. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while since I've seen everybody. So yeah, this is going to be great. I'm looking forward to chatting with you guys today.
I was saying, Coach, you're almost like a West Point cadet. It's like as soon as graduation happens, everyone goes their separate ways and a million miles an hour. And then you don't see them or hear from them very often. But when you do, it feels like not a whole lot of time has gone by, and everyone picks back up. So it's good to see you, Coach.
Yeah, good to see you guys too. We spend a lot of time together, so should be interesting conversations.
Yes, sir.
And so before we get started, just a little introduction about Coach Barbee and his background. He was the head coach for the Army Wrestling program for 10 seasons from 2000 to 2010. He was the 2007-2008 EIWA Coach of the Year. Prior to coming to Army, you were an assistant coach at the University of Oklahoma under Jack Spates, and a 1993 graduate of Oklahoma State University, where you were a three-time All-American. And we'll get into that a little bit too, because that's like the first topic I want to kind of get into is, a lot of listeners know, hey, you were a really successful wrestler, three-time All-American, but really you probably weren't able to reach your college potential because you missed your senior year due to some issues with Oklahoma State. So, if we could start there, I'd love to kind of dive into that and that story a little bit.
Yeah, sure. It was certainly an interesting time. Wrestling at Oklahoma State was exciting. It was challenging. It pushed me really to my limits as a student and as an athlete. And so I was fortunate to first make the team, which was a good accomplishment. And then become a three-time All-American through a lot of work and dedication and sacrifice. And yeah, unfortunately, we had the institution had some issues there towards the end. And a number of us lost our last season of eligibility. And at the time, yeah, it was pretty devastating. And certainly, not really a big factor in my life now. But as we all know, we work towards a goal and we want to be national champions. And so that was really unfortunate how it ended. The wrestling career there, but as we know, that life moves on. There's bigger things down the road, but that was certainly a very negative way to end, and kind of upsetting for all of us. Really, it was really unfortunate. So,
appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, Coach, is curious if you don't mind. Who was Tommy Chesborough the head coach when you first started? Because you went through a couple of coaches there, correct?
Well, no, the only coach I had was Joe C, although we had a lot of assistant coaches that came through. So yeah, Coach C was the head coach during that time. Very familiar with Coach Chesborough, but he wasn't on staff. I take that back. Maybe, when the school got into trouble and Coach C was suspended, then Coach Chesborough stepped in for a little bit, as did Kenny Mundy and John Smith and different people at that time. There was a period of time there when it was like coaching by committee. We didn't really have, it was just people kind of coming in and out. Here we were the returning national championship team, and we're like, well, I guess we'll just all kind of get together and train hard and see what happens here, So it was, there was a lot of upheaval for sure. And it was kind of disappointing how, the whole thing was handled by the school and the wrestlers. It was just a different time back then. There weren't compliance officers. People didn't know the rules really, especially the wrestlers. The coaches are supposed to, obviously, but the wrestlers certainly didn't know them. And so it was just a different time and a different era in regards to rules. And a lot of things changed nationally after that. And so there was just a few of us that just had to learn a hard lesson, and we were kind of led astray by our coach, which was unfortunate. As we all know, leadership is very important. And I would say Coach C, while he had some challenges, he he didn't lead in a really spectacular way that I would deem as a very, not even spectacular, not even necessarily a good way. And it was unfortunate.
Just aside from that though, I mean, I've I don't know if you've heard of the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast, but they got a series about the Smith family, and in that series they actually touch on some of this time, and I was listening to that, and one, it was interesting to kind of listen more, because I remember you telling some of the stories, and I remember you were really, really strict on a lot of the things that we did, which at the time, probably didn't appreciate more now. But I remember that was kind of a little bit of the backdrop was your experience. But maybe I'm, just kind of curious about how that really affected the way you saw things, and maybe I guess changed the way you looked at leadership and being a coach.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, it really did. Ryan Warner there, I am familiar with the podcast and that series and episode, and did talk to Ryan a little bit before that was produced about that kind of situation. And he did a really good job of distilling it down to, Coach C telling the wrestlers to lie to the investigators, and so that was really the essence of the leadership drop, there. And so obviously that did make a big impact to your question, Phil, on me, as far as I didn't really know. And looking back in hindsight on my life and my career, I actually, now I've made almost a life and a career and a living in being an expert in policy and in rules. And I'd like to think reasonably positive in the leadership realm, as far as being an ethical leader, leader of high integrity. And not saying that Joe didn't have integrity, but he made an integrity mistake, in there, which we all do. We all make mistakes, and we learn from them, which I feel like I did. And it certainly had an impact on my career as a coach, maybe swinging almost too far to one end of the spectrum, as far as rules and is there gray area with rules or not, and there's always a subjective area in there where you have to execute some leadership discernment. And we do the best that we can in there. And we kind of look back on some decisions, say, I might have made that decision a little bit differently with a little more wisdom and a little more experience. And so I try not to be too critical, but to your question, it definitely impacted, my perspective, and has kind of led me down the road. Now I'm the secretary rules editor for NCAA wrestling. So I'm like in charge of all the rules. So I don't know if that's just fate or if I was destined from that moment, to, hey, let's get these rules right and let's be fair about it. And let's do everything with the highest integrity.
So that's like where you are like now with it. So I guess initially your reaction, was probably different, but how did that affect like how you maybe like competing after college or getting into coaching? Like, did that drive you or affect, one way or the other, or were you kind of driven to get into coaching after college, regardless?
Yeah, no, it absolutely impacted me negatively. I was just completely ran through the ringer and ready to get away from wrestling after going through that last season, so I was pretty good in freestyle. And, we can all look back and say, oh, I could have did this, I could have did that, which I won't do, but I was pretty good at it, but I was ready to be done. I was ready. I got my secondary education degree, and I was going to go teach. I got really into rock climbing. I'm like moving to Colorado, going to be a teacher and a coach, going to rock climb, going to hike, going to do those things, which I did. That's the way I took it. And I was into high school coaching at Golden, Colorado for 2 years, and enjoyed it, but did start missing the excitement and the challenges of Division I wrestling. And so kind of made the decision after a couple of years of coaching high school that like, hey, I may try to see if I can jump into college coaching. And so I kind of went on this trajectory of University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, then back to the University of Oklahoma. And I know maybe you have some follow-up questions to that, but yeah, I mean, to get back to the original point, yeah, I was ready to be done wrestling. I wanted to go out and live life, try to channel my passion for wrestling into coaching. which I think I did. And so it definitely had an impact for sure. And the other thing it impacts not wrestling after college, to be honest, back in the early 90s was I was tired of being poor. You know, not that going out and being a high school coach made me rich by any stretch, but it was more money than you could make wrestling back then. So my desire to just live a Spartan life, I would almost classify it as ultra Spartan back then. You could hardly make any money wrestling. So it was time to go on and get a job and move on.
Did you meet your wife at some point during this, or when did she come into the picture?
I met my wife while I was still wrestling. So yeah, she kind of went through all of that with me. And so, yeah, it was a tumultuous time for both of us for sure, you know. So there was a lot of anxiety and emotions through that. And, you know, more so you're young, you're 19, 20, 21 years old there, you know. And so I could look back on it now and say, you know, well, things happen. That's just the way life is, you know, you got to move on down the road. But at the time, things are just crumbling, you know. So it's pretty dramatic. It was pretty dramatic in the moment, but she was a tremendous support for sure. And she was willing to pack up the bags and move to Colorado with me, you know, after having grown up in Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Yeah, just as one of your wrestlers, you know, when we were, I remember kind of always asking you questions about like who you wrestled, and you know, they didn't have the internet wasn't as big back then, and we didn't have YouTube and all these things. So, you know, like the only information I ever really got was from Foxcatcher or from Amateur Wrestling News, and I would follow some of the rankings. And so, like, you know, I didn't have a great deal of perspective on how one talented your room was. And I remember, I didn't know you until I met you when you were an assistant in Oklahoma, but I loved listening to the stories of you beating, I think it was Tom Brands or Terry Brands back in the day, and listen to those stories. And then again, one of those things that came out of the podcast I listened to, I remember, was I just did not realize how many studs you guys had in your room at the time. And so I'm curious to just like what that was like. And like, obviously some of those guys went on to, be Olympic champs, and just, I mean, I wonder what that was like as you're coaching, watching some of the guys that you sparred with all the time, having this enormous success. Was that hard?
Yeah, I would say it wasn't hard. I never got the feeling like, oh, geez, I missed my calling or I missed my opportunity. I truly, honestly, just felt excited for all of those folks. We were talking about like, of course, Kendall Cross, Pat Smith, Alan Freed had some success. We're not talking necessarily at the world's and Olympic level with those folks, and even seeing Tom Brands, who I wrestled a lot in college, do well. I mean, I think I knew well enough that there are plenty of wrestlers in the world that said, I beat so-and-so. And so if so-and-so went on to did this, maybe I could have done that too, but the point is I didn't do it and they did, and so, I was happy for them, and that's exciting to see. And thank goodness I didn't feel that, I guess I was ready to be done with wrestling, and I was done, and I moved on, and I really was focused on being the best coach I could be. I never had said that I should have kept wrestling, I never did that. So I think that's a good thing. And maybe I made the right decision in that regard. Now, the other valid question I'll pose is, maybe I should have said, do I want to be a coach? That's the question that maybe I should have analyzed more, because at some point later on in my career, I realized, hey, I don't want to be a coach, and so maybe we have some questions after that. But no, I was always happy for those wrestlers. I mean, there's, we all could say, oh, in high school, I beat John Doe and he went on to be Olympic champion, but I'm not going to do that,
I'll do it for you, just because as one of your wrestlers, I was always super proud about
that. Yeah. I beat a lot of good wrestlers, and they beat me, and I'm happy for those folks that they had some success, because it's certainly, we all know it's hard to put it all together everybody's got talent and potential. It's hard to put it all together on the day of at the right time with the right intensity and with the right set of circumstances. And it's just not an easy thing to do. And when people do it, you know, it's pretty impressive. And even as impressive as it is, it's still just wrestling. You know, there's a lot of other things that are, I'd rather nowadays I could think of a lot of other things I'd like to put together in a perfect sequence than winning a championship that are more important than championships, you know, so.
Like riding dirt bikes.
What's that?
Like riding dirt bikes.
Well, no, not like riding dirt bikes. But I will say you do have to have some hobbies, you know, it's good to have those things. So, but I'm not a championship dirt bike rider, no.
So Phil, you first met Coach Barbee when he was at Oklahoma. How did you guys meet? I feel like listeners probably want to hear about that. I feel like I've heard it, but I don't really remember the story that well. Was it like a summer camp or something?
Yeah, go ahead, Phil. You can tell your part, and then I'll tell. You want me to tell mine? Okay. Yeah, no, let me tell mine, and you can add in some color here. So I was at University of Oklahoma as the assistant coach. And I was like any assistant coach, you know, you want to make more money, you want to get more responsibility, you're looking for coaching jobs, you know. And I had applied for a couple of jobs. I think I applied for like Northern Iowa University. I applied for Navy actually, which was really interesting, and was I never had a chance to get it, but I think the Bruce Burnett and Zeke Jones and I were the people they interviewed, and so that had happened in right around 2000, like in the summer of 2000. And I didn't get the Navy job. And so I went back, I was like, okay, I'm going to be at Oklahoma. I could be getting my summers messed up here, so Phil can correct me. But at some point in there, the Army job came open, and I thought, well, if I was interested in Navy, I've got to be interested in Army. So I started the application process for that. And at the same time, we had Oklahoma University summer camps going on, and Phil happened to come to the summer camp in Oklahoma. And so I had a decent idea I was going to get the job, and I watched Phil wrestle a lot, and I was like, holy smokes, he's tough, you know? And I was like, the first thing I thought in my mind, if I get the Army job, I'm calling Phil first thing. This is literally what I thought. And so Phil's at the camp with me as OU and as the OU coach, and then he goes home, and then I don't remember how many weeks or months later, I do get the job at West Point. And I was like, finally, I can call Phil. So I call Phil and start talking to him about wrestling in college. And of course, he thinks I'm the Oklahoma coach, but I'm really now the Army West Point coach. So Phil, did I get it right?
Yeah, you did. You got it right. Yeah, so from my perspective, it's funny. I'm going to throw Kevin in here because it's almost like full circle. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I had to, I was going to try to get a wrestling scholarship to go to college. My mom and dad said, you're either going to join the military or get a wrestling scholarship. So I was at one of the tournaments. I did both. I got them back. But I was at a tournament that Kevin Ward was at, and Kevin was really good in high school, and he was walking around with an Oklahoma Sooners bag. And I was like, oh, Kevin, you thinking about going to Oklahoma? He was like, yeah. And I was like, oh man, maybe I should be thinking about going to Oklahoma. So that was what spurred the idea of like, okay, well, I better like go to the camp because nobody knows who I am. And I need to like get in front of somebody and show them that I can wrestle. So that's how I ended up going to Oklahoma, was because I thought Kevin was thinking about going to Oklahoma. And then I went down there and was talking to Coach Spates, and Coach Spates was a great guy, but I quickly zeroed in on Coach Barbee because his technique, and I just everything he was showing, I kind of gravitated towards, and it just made a lot of sense. And I was like, man, he is a great coach. And I could tell, at the time they had some serious studs, Michael Leitner and Whit Durden. Both of those guys were, small around my weight class and really good. And so I just watched him coach. And so when he called me, I was jumping up and down. I was like, yeah, Oklahoma's called me. And he said, yeah, I'm actually the coach at West Point. And I was like, isn't that like a military school? And he said, yeah. I was like, oh. And then they do like push-ups and stuff. And then from there it's history. And I do remember there was a brief moment, Coach, where I was let down big time, but
yeah,
but I followed you for sure, and that worked out. Probably one of the best decisions I ever made.
Yeah, that was funny because I still remember that camp and watching Phil, and I probably have a note somewhere. It was like, call Phil Simpson once I get the job, and it was literally the first call I made for sure on recruiting. So, of course, you never know how, when you're recruiting, it's really hard to always know how interested a wrestler is in your school, you know? So we recruited Phil really hard. And then, you know, we just kind of I recruited Kevin Ward really hard. I actually really thought we would get Kevin and Philip together, which I thought, oh, this is going to be amazing because they would have been, you know, they would have worked themselves out on the weight just fine, one above the other. But it didn't work out with Kevin. So
he actually, I was talking to him yesterday on the phone, and he was like, "You need to bring that up. That you know, the head coach of the program almost went to West Point, and bring that up to Chuck, and be like, why couldn't he get him?"
Actually, me and Kevin both were on the same recruiting trip. We both flew up at the same time. I thought he was coming as well, and of course, then he goes and goes to your old alma mater, Coach Barbie. But I was disappointed he was going to be my workout partner, and it was going to be great.
Yeah, I honestly thought I thought he was coming too, Phil. And I will say, Coach Ward can disagree with me, but I will speculate that I think he would have had more wrestling accomplishments had he come to West Point than had he gone to Oklahoma State. So
100% agree.
Coach Ward, you can refute that if you want, but I'm envisioning multi-time All-American status at Army West Point if he would have been there. So
any specifics on why you think that? Or
I think he would have been in the starting lineup from day one. I think he would have progressed faster. He would have got more attention. He would have got equal or better coaching. I'm tooting my own horn. So yeah. And I think he would have excelled in the environment. And I think he would have done really well, you know? So, I mean, it's, you know, we have shown, Phil showed, Maurice Worthy showed, Matt Kyler showed, you know, that you can go to Army West Point, and with the right focus and the right sort of balance in your life, you can be an All-American. We didn't get a national champion while I was there, but we were painfully close, you know? And so getting people on that podium is really important. It's not everything in a season, but it's important. And so, you know, it's exciting to be able to see Phil and Matt and Maurice do that, and the others. So I think Kevin had the potential to do that. And sometimes the environment can matter. And Oklahoma State environment, you can't question it. But for some folks, other environments they excel in, and I just happen to think he would excel in our system.
Yeah, I think particular, just from my perspective, I think, you know, being in Tennessee, we didn't have a lot of, you know, we just weren't exposed to a lot of great wrestling. And so we were kind of maybe big fish in small pond, and, you know, just chatting. And I remember, you know, talking to him when he was even there. You go from being big fish in small pond to small fish in a big pond. And that's a grueling environment. That's something I've gained a lot of appreciation for, is just those programs. They really grind you out. And so I definitely feel like I won getting you, Coach Barbie, and being able to pick your brain every day, and getting the attention that you gave. And no doubt, I chose the right place for me. And but it's funny. It's great seeing Kevin and Coach Ward kind of continuing your legacy and proving that we can win at West Point. And so he's done a great job with the program. I know we'll get into that a little bit later, but it's exciting to see that. But I'd love you, Brian, when you talk to him next time, I'd love to hear what he thinks. If he has any thoughts about what it would have been like if he would have came, particularly if he had a really good workout partner.
Yeah. Well, and if he would have came, though, he might not be the coach at Army West Point now. You know, it would maybe arguably be a little harder.
He's been at West Point longer than I was.
Yeah. I've been at West Point longer than all y'all.
Ah, that's true.
By double.
Yeah, actually more than both of us, I think, combined.
Yeah, yeah. I will say West Point is designed, in my opinion, for short stints. So it's definitely it's a challenging place for a civilian to live for an extended period of time.
Coach,
for some civilians, I should say. Some people adapt right to it well.
Highland Falls has got a lot to offer. But actually, the first place I ever went when you brought me up for the trip was Shade's Pizza, and that was always a good staple. So, I would like to ask you. I would like to ask you, Coach, just kind of like now we're talking about a little bit more about your time at West Point. We're kind of moving into that. What would you say was some of your fondest memories and some of the things that when you look back on that time that you cherish the most about your experience?
Yeah, it was 10 years, so it was really a long time. It's hard to pin down like single memories here and there, especially since we're 10 years out of it. I think generally speaking, just like most coaches, spending time with the wrestlers, helping them to work through challenges and issues, and try to just help them to achieve their wrestling goals. And get them graduated. I always think about graduating and seeing people move on. And I kind of missed as I coached. What I would have really liked the most was when the wrestlers started coming back. That would have been really cool to still be there. That part is kind of like maybe one thing that if I had a regret, I'd be like, oh, that would have been really cool to start getting your own wrestlers back. But as far as just the time there, if I look at, like most of us, we look back on things and there is a bit of like, oh, I should have enjoyed this more. I should have enjoyed that more. I should have been a little more in the moment here. But just generally getting to know young people that were like you all, like Brian, like you, Phil, like your brothers, all your teammates, just getting to know them as people and persons and spending time with them and coaching them and try to help them achieve their wrestling goals. That's something I'll always definitely cherish. And, I was far from a perfect coach. I think honestly, if I was coaching now, I'd be way better than I was when I was with you all. Just like we all think we just get older and wiser and more experienced and seasoned, so I guess part of me wants to apologize for being insufficient in a lot of areas. But hopefully you were able to benefit maybe from some of my interactions, like I benefited from interactions with you all, Yeah,
no, I appreciated all our time together. I only had great experiences. I probably wasn't the best cadet wrestler. There was, putting it softly, but I really enjoyed my time with you and at West Point and, under your leadership.
Well, Brian, one thing I'll say about you is I always knew about you from the very beginning. You loved wrestling way more than I did. I could tell you're just like a wrestling purist, a fan. I was like, oh my God, Brian likes wrestling more than even I do. And so I always knew you were just into it and you liked all aspects of it, and you knew all the people, and so that was always cool. A memory of me thinking back of you on your time as a cadet.
I appreciate that. I wish I'd like to maybe getting better technically at developing a shot. That would have been. That's another episode. That's another episode for another time.
Yeah, sure.
Just kind of touching a little bit on while your time there is you span, obviously 10 years. So I came in, obviously your second year. So you had just had a very successful first year. Maurice Worthy obviously making it to the finals. That was really exciting. And I came in and, I remember thinking we probably had to have the most unique wrestling room in the entire country. And so I kind of separate your years, the Coach Barbee first years being Cullum Hall, and then your second years where you guys were all spoiled and had a really, really nice facility. And so maybe talk a little bit about that. you know, what that was
Yeah.
like. And did you miss the rock climbing wall that we had? And how was that experience going from, you know, coaching in a dance, you know, basically a dance hall, and then getting a really, really nice facility?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Phil, because that's a credit to your class and the class after 2 or 3 classes there that had a lot of vision to come in, because when I got there to Army, to West Point, boy, it was rough. Budgets were low. We were in, as Phil said, a dance hall that was it had like 10 lumens worth of light in it, you know, and it had birds that would kind of arc across the skyline as the pigeons would sit on one end, you know, and when it rained, my ceiling would fall in because the porch above it leaked, you know, and so I worked in a down parka, you know, and so it was a really rough existence there. And the wrestlers didn't have a locker room, you know, there was just so many challenges, and honestly, so many real legitimate reasons to complain massively, you know, but the wrestlers never did that. I mean, to the point where it hurt us as a team, I felt, you know, they just rolled with the flow and did so much and didn't, and, you know, and so, but for me, I'm like a little bit in a panic, you know, cause I'm like, oh my God, who's going to want to come here with this sort of setup, you know? So we're using smoke and mirrors and makeup coverings everywhere, you know, we're doing everything you can imagine to make this, like, look at the view of the Hudson River as you finish practice, you know, like things that we could do. So it was really hard for sure. And so there's really actually, other than, I don't really know that there was any positive about being in Cullum Hall for 2 or 3 years at all. It was just hard for the wrestlers. I felt bad for them that they didn't have showers. They, you know, but there was really nothing that I could do when Arvin Hall was being built, and they say, oh, the Congress is holding up the money, so it's going to be another year, you know, or something. So I give those groups a lot of credit, man. They showed up and we made the best of it. And we put Phil in the national finals wrestling in Cullum Hall, just a hair's breadth away from being an NCAA champion. That's a lot of credit to the team and the coaching staff, Coach Chesbro, who was there at the time working with that. So it was hard, Phil, for sure. And I walked away from Cullum Hall and I never wanted to go back. And I was like, we put our time in there. The other thing that was interesting at that time too is when I first got there, they used these things. It was like going back in the 1970s. It felt like to me, honestly, because Phil, you remember the rolls, you know?
Rolls, that's right.
Yeah, and I don't know if they still do rolls now, but at least if they do rolls now, they use 21st century gear, you know, and not gear that looked like it was from like the 1980s or something. We used to work out in polyester shorts, and you know, it was like we had to modernize ourselves like quick, and so. Yeah, I don't think everyone realizes the accomplishment of bringing that program from 2000 to 2005. There they are. He's got a pair right there. Those are the classics. That was 2002. It looks like it should be 1977, doesn't it?
I thought he was kind of coming back in or something. I didn't know that those were they were that old.
And we all just held them up and just went, well, I got to wear something, you know.
I was just happy somebody else was doing the laundry.
Yeah. So to get the jump that program made, I'm going to give Nick Reggio and Rick Greenspan, the ADs at the time, that hired me. The jump that program made from 2000 to 2005 is like, I can't even tell you how massive that jump is, you know, from their just budgets, facilities, coaching staff. We had our challenges with the DOD budget cuts in there, you know, and coaching staff. Coaching turnover was always a big challenge. We didn't pay enough. It was expensive to live in the area, you know. So, but we made some big strides there for sure. And the Arvin facility was the best thing ever.
Yeah, that's great. I don't want you to ever feel bad. I actually had such fond memories. It's funny when we would be practicing on Saturdays, but particularly during the fall, you know, the alumni would come back for the alumni weekend, and you'd see these, you know, these guys and girls, they'd be bringing their significant others back in to reminisce about their days. And then they would be crying when they walked in and trying to, you know, enjoy this, you know, serenading them with these memories. And they would see a bunch of sweaty, smelly guys wrestling in there. I remember watching their faces. Well, when I go back, I'm going to go back in and see a really beautiful dance hall and cry. I'm like, oh, there's my wrestling room.
Yeah, if we had
a lot of great memories there.
Yeah, if we had $1 for every alum that came in and they went like this, you know, when they saw the room.
In the right place. Yeah. Well, I had such great memories from that, and so like I didn't know any different, and at a place like West Point, it was really a sanctuary. So you did a great job. But I do remember, you know, when coming back and watching the next class and seeing the new facilities, and it was really, really, really great to see the, you know, West Point to, you know, invest in that. And it's really cool seeing, you know, Kevin Ward's got obviously massive plans and has done an incredible job. And, you know, he's, you know, really pushing and trying to get even a, you know, take it up another level. I mean, you took it from, you know, where we were to really nice facility, and Kevin's pushing it to an even better, you know, standalone wrestling facility, which I never would have thought would ever been possible.
Yeah.
So it's just really exciting to hear that and see the program really take another leap.
That is exciting to see, and hopefully that works out well for them. The one single benefit of the standalone, it could be a little farther away, but it'll be air conditioned in the summer. And right now, because if there is one failing, I got the wool pulled over my eyes with Arvin. I said, now it's climate controlled, right? And they said, yes, it is. And
only in the winter.
That meant only heat in the winter. So we, you know, the no air conditioning in the room is not ideal. So with humid weather, but yeah, the standalone's good. If that comes to fruition, that'll be really cool, and the wrestlers will love it. And they'll have a dedicated space, and that's always an awesome enhancement to your program when you get something like that.
Yeah, Brian, you'd need that air conditioner, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't do with that. Honestly, I don't remember it being super hot in the summer though. Like I don't know.
Oh boy, it doesn't even have to be the summer. It could just be the humidity. You know, the mats get so slippery, but the summers are brutal. The wrestlers, you weren't there as much in the summer, but it was pretty brutal in the summer with summer camps and, you know, summer sessions with plebes coming in, you know, and everything. But it was okay. That's a minor complaint compared to Arvin.
Look, I also never wrestled in Cullum Hall either, so. My experience there was coming up on a recruiting trip. So my plebe year, we literally, you know, from Beast, we went into Arvin, and that was like the brand new facility. So we were like oohing and on. Yeah,
you didn't miss anything, Brian. So
well, you missed a climbing wall. We had a climbing wall.
We did have a climbing wall, yeah.
So it's kind of interesting looking back at your time at West Point, like, you know, the initial success with like Maurice Worthy right in the first year. And then you had Phil, you know, coming right after that. And then pretty much, you know, maybe like a year or two, and then Kyler came out. And then when Kyler graduated, you moved on after that. You know, was that like a, you know, just a coincidence, or like, did you plan like, hey, maybe it's my time to move on now? Talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, no, that was really, there was no coinciding with Matt or any other wrestler. It was really just the timing that worked for me, you know, and for my family, as you can imagine. And I guess it worked out to where, you know, Matt, you know, had graduated and was one of the better wrestlers, obviously, at the time. And unfortunately, we didn't get him to the All-American round in his senior year, which was a bummer for sure. But no, the timing just worked out for me and my family. As you can imagine, I'm a mid-career person. I'm deciding to go away from something I've been doing for a long time. I'm kind of at the pinnacle of the coaching ladder. You know, people want to coach, you coach D1, you think you're going to stay there. And you're like, oh, here's this crazy guy going to move his wife and 4 kids across the country during the middle of what turned out to be a recession, you know? And so, we planned it out well. Luckily, it turned out good, but and found jobs here in Arizona and moved on with life. But no, it was kind of just a personal decision for me. It was time to step away and go a different direction. And I was, there's a lot of reasons behind that we can discuss if we want to go down those roads, but it definitely was just a personal decision.
Mm-hmm. It's funny when we did Matt's episode, I tried to bring up that point, like, you graduated and then he left, he graduated and then you left. And I was trying to make this like sentimental moment, like, what were some of the things that, Chuck taught you, trying to get really in the feels. And he was like, he didn't get it at all. He was like, yeah, I'd say a sprawl. You really taught me about sprawl. I was like, oh God, we missed the mark on that one.
Yeah. No, I enjoyed all my time, every wrestler, whether they didn't start or we talk about the Phils and the Matts and the Maurices a lot, and they deserve all the accolades and credits, but we had so many tremendous wrestlers, Brian, like yourself, everyone that wasn't in the limelight. So I want all the wrestlers that may watch this to know I think about every single one of you all the time, and we do have some fun stories as a program that we're all a part of, these championship wrestler success. So it is cool to talk about those. And Matt was a great one. And I'll always remember, it was so ironic when he became All-American that he beat a wrestler from Penn State, because he's a PA guy. Brian, you're a PA guy. And it couldn't have been any sweeter and scripted any better to pin a Penn State wrestler for him to become All-American, and same with Phil. I mean, I don't know if people, it's been a long time, Phil, since your freshman year, you're getting up, we're all aging as we should, but people might not know how close Phil was to being a 4-time All-American. It's like we're talking microns close with the wrestler from Minnesota, like just milliseconds from being a 4-time All-American, which would have been awesome, but it didn't happen, right, Phil?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah. It was very, 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 very close, which 3-time is huge, but force huger. Yeah. So yeah, lots of good memories there. And so.
Yeah, I don't think we ever told you this, but my plebe year, we went on an F&M trip, and Patty and Luke Calvert and John Anderson jumped off their hotel room, and they had adjoining rooms, and they got kicked out of their rooms, and so they didn't have a room, so they just stayed with us, and like we had basically one room for all the wrestlers. And we kept it from you guys for the whole night. Nobody said anything, so we wouldn't get in trouble.
I did hear about that. It was not in real time though. Somehow I heard about that after the fact, but that's a good one. Yeah. that is a good one. I'm sure there's a multitude of those out there, so as there should be. You are young, and I'm sure I was a hard ass on more than one occasion, and I probably mellowed. I'd be much softer and cooler now, so.
Phil, you want to go next? Sure.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I just, I'm sitting here smiling just because I'm thinking back, and it's bringing back a lot of memories, and a lot of, we call Coach Barbie, Coach Barbie-isms. One of the funniest things I like to watch is everyone tries to have their, Coach Barbie impressions, and there's a lot of funny sayings out there. And so I wish we could put a compilation of that. I think you'd get a kick out of it, Coach Barbie. But I always enjoyed, Jason Subi might have had some of the funniest ones that I can remember. He particularly loved the one where you said, you'd always say 3 bumps, off the whistle.
Yeah.
And we just had just a lot of your sayings and quirks. We were very endearing. I enjoy thinking back on those and all the coffee and Diet Coke that you drank, and you got me on that as well.
Yeah. Those are, you never know how country you are till you hear somebody else imitate you, like, oh my God, is that how I sound? So, no, I guess, 3 bumps is key still. You know,
still very much so, very much so.
And I will say, yeah, I was talking. I know the whole thing is BHAW. That's long after me. I was thinking like maybe I'd like to think the teams kind of progressed into that. We had that mentality. I remember I was big on team point speed, you know, and so yeah, and so I think that maybe that might have been the precursor knowledge into the new aged BHAW.
Yeah, I feel like there's been a couple different ones.
Yeah, some other Patrick. Yeah, that was. I was just talking to Patrick before I got on here with you, Coach, and that was one of the things that he mentioned was just like probably the culture change. You know that happened. You know, I remember when I got there, and then when he got there, and really, you know, we had a lot of probably pretty good wrestlers, but I don't know if they really took it as seriously. But the culture you built and the just around the team, and that was really 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 cool to see us go from just kind of a bunch of wrestlers to really a team that made a lot of strides and did a lot of really good things in a tough conference. We EIWA was starting to really blossom when we were getting going with Cornell and Pennsylvania. And so, it was Lehigh, obviously. So, that is one thing I wanted to mention was like, I do know that the culture you made a huge shift. And I think that's obviously only continued through, Coach Haskett and now Coach Ward. And I think, that you really laid the groundwork for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Phil. And yeah, I appreciate that for sure. And, it's like anything, hopefully you leave something that's a good solid foundation that can be built on. So I've been super happy to see the success and just feel, and I'm just now just a blip in the history, which is cool to be, it's all we all are eventually with everything, so you just try to make it a little bit better, make your mark on that, learn from your mistakes during those times, try to improve yourself over the course of your life. So it's good to hear that you guys feel like it was an improvement and a good experience, that means a lot.
Do you miss coaching at all?
I don't miss coaching one bit. No. No, there's a time I always said.
That was a really quick response there.
Yeah, no, my life is better in every single way, not coaching. I'll just put it that bluntly, and so that's just me, I always said I would coach. I'm not going to be one of those coaches that is going to just be hanging on and doing it because it's a paycheck. It was a huge sacrifice leaving. I'd be way better off financially right now coaching, but life is not about money. Life is not about, just prestige or positions of power or any of those things, And so my life is better as a coach, is better not as a coach than it was as a coach. That doesn't mean I don't regret my time being a coach. I learned a ton from that. It's part of my legacy. It's molded me into who I am. Hopefully it's positively impacted some young lives as they progress through theirs. But I wanted to be one of those people that said, okay, I'm not 110% into this, so I'm going to move on down the road and let somebody do it who is. And I'm not going to look back. And I didn't look back, and I've never been happier. Yeah, I'm involved with the sport and at a level that is good for me because not everybody can do wrestling 24/7, 360. It's got to be more of your life than it was of mine. I wanted more in my life than just wrestling. And being a D1 coach, it's really hard to have a whole lot more in your life than wrestling. I think probably the coaches who do it the best are the ones that can kind of just incorporate everything together. And that's just not me. I need some segregation, So you probably noticed that is the way I coach. I wasn't a coach having barbecues with everyone over, and there wasn't a coach hosting people. It's like I had X amount to give, and I couldn't give any more, And so that's and at some point I got no more to give to the point where like I need to move on down the road. So there's probably some coaches out there now that probably need to self-assess and say, hey, maybe I need to move on down the road too. You know, you probably enjoy your life a little bit more and give somebody else a chance, you know.
Couldn't agree more. So let's move into your current role. We'll go back to, towards the end of this and kind of go into some sound bites that we got from from some listeners who tuned in or asked questions, things like that. But as the rules guy, and I follow wrestling Twitter, not super well, but well enough to see, when new rules come out or after NCAAs, a bunch of coaches are chirping about, we want this rule to change and this and that. I guess, talk to us a little bit about your role, with the rules, and then maybe some of the rule changes for this college year.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the role that I have is I am the NCAA Wrestling Secretary Rules Editor. And I have a second role where I'm also the weight management liaison. So just quickly, the weight management liaison is I just oversee the weight management process across the country at all the schools and institutions. All right. So it's a very important role. I'm an advocate for the weight management rules and proper rules, following the rules of that, making sure that certifications get done properly. And so that's kind of a behind the scenes, but it's very important role. The more public role is the Secretary Rules Editor role, where the way it works in NCAA wrestling is there's a committee, it's just called the Rules Committee, and they basically are responsible for implementing new rules. And so we make new rules every 2 years. And in between that 2-year cycle, every year, there's anytime you have a rule book or you make new rules, there's always going to be gray areas. You're going to need interpretations. The text in the rule reads this way, but what about this question? Or what if this comes up? And so the way it's set up is so that we have a unified single voice. There's only one person who interprets rules, and that's me, the Secretary Rules Editor. And so any question about a rule comes to me. I either say it's already been interpreted, and so go look at the rules book or this document we call the case book, or I say, oh, that's a new one here. I'll have to do some research now, and I'll make an official interpretation on that, and I'll make it public to the coaches and the referees, and then I'll codify it in the case book, so that the entire country is working off the same sheet of music here with rules, as opposed to referees thinking that they're interpreters or regional coordinators thinking they're interpreters. And then you say, oh, on the West Coast, they call it like this, but on the East Coast, they call it like that. That doesn't happen. And if it ever does happen, it should get nipped like that, because everyone needs to be applying the rules in the same way. And so it's a lot of responsibility to, make good interpretations. I feel like in some ways, my entire wrestling career has led up to this ability to kind of coalesce all of my wrestling knowledge to listen to hard questions and to make sound and fair decisions, And so that's kind of like in a big picture view of what it's like, And so I answer a lot of emails. I go to the championships if they have questions. If the championship committee has questions about rules, I tell them, here's the way the rule is, or I research it, So it's, I've been doing it about 6 years now. So I have a baseline of knowledge that's pretty good. But I'm still looking through the book. I'm reading sentences. I'm making sure we use certain specific words. Yeah, it's very challenging. And as you might imagine, I'm dealing with a lot of high emotion sometimes, Yeah. And so that's can be challenging. But it's a good way to be involved. It suits my skill set. I'm a good policy person. I write policy for my work at Arizona State. I implement and execute policy, and I hold people accountable. I apply sanctions. I do all these different things, so it sits pretty well with that. So I don't know if you have any follow-up questions, but that's kind of like the big picture of what the Secretary Rules Editor does.
I was going to use this as my platform to ask rules that I think should be changed. No, I'm just joking. I'll go to Twitter for that.
Yeah, that's where the experts are, Brian.
But if I would suggest one thing, this is my pet peeve.
Okay.
The wrestling area, especially for the NCAA finals, the out of bounds area is not big enough so that the wrestlers can wrestle there. And I feel like maybe not every year, but like guys finishing a takedown, guy steps on the, you know, the end of the like outside the mat area, and then it gets the whistle blows and they can't wrestle. And there's parts of the areas of the mat that are shorter out of bounds than the others. And all it would take is just a bigger out of bounds area. And I feel like on the big stage, that shouldn't be an issue. Like both wrestlers should be able to be like completely out of bounds without being off the stage. That's the only thing I'll say.
Yeah. No, point taken. I'll even consider that for the championship committee because they are supposed to have 5 feet of mat protection outside the circle. So if we have enough space on the elevated structure and we request those mats new every year, potentially, I'm not sure about that. This is outside of my area. There's no reason why we can't ask for a mat that has 7 feet of protection area outside the circle, even though the rule only requires 5. We do recommend 8, but the rule only requires 5. So they're probably right at 5.
I tweeted.
Yeah, you might need 8 because some of these kids can do the splits nowadays, and
yeah,
like there's some crazy flexibility that we didn't have back in our day. That people can get their toes out.
Yeah. Well, if we get a bigger mat on the center stage, Brian, we'll call it the Rowan claws, and you'll have your mark.
That shouldn't excite me as much as it does.
Last question for me, Coach. Are there going to be any crazy changes this upcoming year? Are there any rules that you would like to see changed?
No crazy changes this year. If you've been following rules over the last 6 years, we've made an enormous number of changes. And I think for the most part, generally all good. We had a rule book that was kind of stuck in the 80s, and so now we got facial hair. Now no hair rules. We got lots of good things. No hanging down on ankles, just stalling. The drop down counts. I mean, I think I will say before I became secretary rules editor, I didn't like watching the wrestling. It was so boring and annoying, and so I feel really good about it. And we're not perfect, but we're in a pretty good space with college wrestling. I feel like the rules are pretty good. They're never going to be perfect. People on Twitter want perfection. They're living in fantasy land and they'll never have perfection. And so, we have a good rule set. So this year we've made so many changes. We've been trying to slow down a little bit. So they're just incremental changes. Now we're trying to get more of the overtimes to finish with an exciting takedown. So instead of 1 minute sudden victory, it'll be 2. That's a pretty modest change, but hopefully we'll see more of those, not go to the tiebreaker rideouts. Also now you can win with net riding time advantage after the first tiebreaker rounds. So we should very rarely go to a second sudden victory or a second set of tiebreakers because, the only way it could happen is they both ride each other out. So it could happen, but it's going to happen a lot less,
Right.
And so that'll be good. We implemented, there's some other things like a 2-hour weigh-in for multi-day tournaments now, just to standardize that like at the NCAA tournament. So wrestlers would have to normally okay, let me get my nutrition and hydration and warm-up plan for a 2-hour weigh-in. Then the next day we do a 1-hour weigh-in. And, and so that's hard. So we made it 2 hours across the board with that. Other than that, there's just some small things here and there, but nothing really big or monumental. It's a pretty low-key year for rule changes.
I know a lot of people, and I'll say one more thing, but I know a lot of people are wanting to move towards like a push-out rule in folk style. Do you ever see that happen, or can you comment on that?
We talk about that all the time, and I'm not talking as this SRE representative. I'm talking as Coach Barbee on BHAW, here. And so what we have now, granted, referees need application, but they need application with what we have is so much better than a push out, in my opinion. Okay. It encourages wrestlers to stay on the mat. Push outs encourage people to push. All right. They were proven to do that with freestyle wrestling. And even if you do go with the push out and you think that's better, there's still so much subjectivity on were they down on their knees, who stepped out first, did I get it right, you know? So we're going to coach up our referees, continue to help them get better. We realize again that the neutral out of bounds stalling rule is not, it's not perfect, but perfection doesn't exist. What it does is it's designed to keep wrestlers on the mat. And it does that. It does it very well. It's proven with the data. And so coaches like to complain a lot. And I shouldn't say that. Some coaches like to complain. A lot of coaches don't say one word about it. Fans like to complain. I will say that a lot on Twitter. And so every coach in the country knows the rule. They know that no wrestler can force an unnecessary restart in the neutral position. So if you don't coach your wrestlers to get off the line and control the center, then you're just playing with fire. You might get called for stalling if you go out of bounds, you know? So it's really a rule that also a coach could really out-coach another coach by being good at it, you know? And so I hope coaches take it on like, I'm going to out-coach the other guy with this rule. And I think the rule is set up so that you could do that.
Very well said.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm not a fan of the push out, Brian. Sorry, I drugged that. I could have just said don't really like it. But again, I don't even vote. And so the rules committee deliberates this, all sides. That's the one thing that people like to do on Twitter. No one really ever looks truly at both sides. And so everyone has their opinion, but when you really sit in a room for 4 hours and go over with some of the great coaches and ADs in the sport, and you really go over both sides, you start thinking, oh, okay, well, I think what we have is pretty good, you know?
So we have some listener, I wouldn't say they're questions. Some of them were questions. Actually, Ty Reedy texted me and Phil yesterday, probably 20 questions. I don't know if he actually wanted them to be asked, but or if he was just trying to be there for comedic relief. But a lot of people put some of your Chuck Barbee quotes out there. Did you?
Oh, they did.
Oh yeah.
Let's hear him, Brian.
I wish I had a list in front that I could just have Coach Barbee saying. But this one was my personal favorite. Pop-Tart is poor man's power bar.
Yeah.
True statement.
That is a true statement. Yeah, absolutely.
Lean dog's mean dog.
Yeah, that's I got that from Tommy Chesbro. That's a classic and pretty true.
You got to be on that leg like a rat on a Cheeto, or a rat on a Cheeto.
Yeah, I think that's a Barbie original. I think. I'm sure I got it from. We all get stuff from everyone, but once you forget where it came from, it becomes your own.
Have you ever seen a rat on a Cheeto before?
No, it's all about your imagination. It's your imagination of what that might look like. But if you think about it, it's pure intensity, right?
That's right.
It's focused in the moment intensity, you know?
I can definitely imagine that after cutting weight, a rat on a Cheeto. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Tommy Hendricks actually said, take a slice of cheese off that box lunch sandwich, man. Nobody needs 2 slices. those box lunches were the absolute worst.
Yeah, you're right there. Those were horrible. And 2 slices of cheese was even of rubberized cheese was even worse.
Rudy Chlednik had a few of them. He goes, this is in quotes, Rudy, you can't be kicking Matt Kyler in the face. That one. Or Patrick Smith was definitely ready for that match to be over. Probably. Sorry, Pat.
Sorry about that. That must have been a weak moment for me.
Oh, man. Phil, do you remember some of the ones that Ty had yesterday?
Hold on, let me pull them up here.
I didn't realize, I mean, I guess maybe I forget about it, but I didn't realize how good of a jump roper you were.
Me?
I said you were pretty much he called you that there was not a better college wrestler not a college wrestler that was better at jumping rope.
I was decent at jump rope, and yeah, it was fun. I don't think I would be the best though, but that's a nice compliment.
Let's see. Oh, Phil's the one actually asked, have you ever seen a rat on a Cheeto? Let's see. And this was a serious question. Who was your biggest overachiever? Someone who had no credentials coming in and who just surprised you through their career. I probably can guess this, but I'll let you.
Yeah, that's an overachiever. Maybe, yeah, probably John Anderson.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Right. I mean, there's others, but John certainly comes to mind for sure, because yeah, he really didn't. And he said this before. I think he was on the show, just to make sure on the record what's accurate. I literally did recruit him based on his email he sent to me. Yeah, where he said he wanted to be Olympic champion. He really sent that. And I think it was I can't remember where I was at when I read it. And I needed a 125 pounder, like, haha, that's funny. he was like 112 or 19 at the time. And so, but I literally did, because I was not sure I was going to try to get him in or not, with slots and recruiting and juggling all those things. And I was like, oh no, yeah, we definitely got to go for him now. Yeah, it was good. I wish I would have kept it. Maybe he has it in his scent box somewhere. But John was a good one. But we had a lot of, Army wrestling is about overachievement. It's a place where coaching matters. Not that coaching doesn't matter everywhere, but you gotta, and I told this to Kevin, I told this to Joe Heskett, I was like, you're gonna make your living on seniors. You gotta coach up. You have to, and I told every assistant coach, don't count out anyone. We prioritize our time with wrestlers all the time, but don't count anyone out, because you never know who's going to come through in their senior year and be the surprise. And at Army West Point, you had to develop talent, because you just didn't get as many blue chippers that were going to just come right in to do it. And so I think, in addition to John, we had 10 years worth of overachievers, and that's a testament to, just people's commitment to the program and to working hard and learning. And so being a D1 athlete is super tough, so literally just spending 4 years and not quitting is a huge accomplishment,
Yeah, especially looking back. I mean, that's one thing that Coach Ward talks about. And when you measure the success of classes, a lot of it is like how many freshmen start out in that class, and then how many graduate and are still wrestling. And in the last 2 years, there's been 12 or 13 firsties, that stayed on the team all 4 years, of maybe 15, 16, 17 that come in. And, when I look back, it was a lot, and not that it's, any different now, but I think it's that brotherhood is maybe like a little bit more now. Like you have that accountability within the classes, where they feel like they don't want to leave, because that's where all their friends are and their closest, brothers. Where I think the norm was, 18 guys come in and 6 or 7 guys graduate. It was kind of like the norm before kind of like the current shift.
Yeah, Coach Ward seems to be doing a great job with that for sure. And that is a good testament. And you can have some really good teams if you have just this consecutive crops of juniors and seniors coming in there, filling the majority of your lineup.
Yeah, you look at Taylor Brown this year, as a national qualifier, first year starter, 84. But yeah, that's another.
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah, my play year we had Eric Miller. Was a guy that really came on strong and had an incredible senior year. And then we had Justin Gorkowski the year after. And yeah, those were, really just tough and gritty. They make up, a lot of those guys made up for maybe a lack of skill and technique, with just tough and gritty, just being tough and gritty.
Yeah, those I totally agree with that. We had a lot of tough and gritty wrestlers over the years. Absolutely.
So before we wrap up, though, kind of, I didn't realize you listened to a bunch of these episodes before. I was thinking that you probably maybe listened to like one or two or haven't heard it before. But who do you think we should do on the show? From your era, time from you were there that we haven't had on. Who do you think would be interesting?
I honestly like hearing anybody that wrestled for me is always interesting, so I'd hate to single out any individuals, because I really do enjoy hearing from all of them. And I try to stay connected. Sometimes I'll cross paths on LinkedIn with some people, or Brian, where you and I'll text on Instagram, or I'll see somebody on Twitter, so any former wrestler under my regime is cool. But I also think it'd be neat to consider maybe like a Gene Palka or a Todd Messett someday, and get some of their perspectives. That'd be an interesting perspective to kind of have on record. They've played a lot of some very important behind the scenes roles and different things about even which coaches got hired, like why did they hire them, or program things, or just helping wrestlers behind the scenes. That might be interesting. So those would be my two: any former wrestler under me, or three, Todd Messett and Gene Palka.
Awesome. Phil, you got anything else before we wrap up?
No, just thanks, Coach. I'm sure, I speak for everyone that wrestled under you. Just, West Point was a transformative experience for me. And you played a huge part in that. It was, just a great time, a great experience, and a lot of life lessons that were learned. And I still have many dreams, and that I still have a year of eligibility left. And I wish it were true. Yeah, really, really just thank you just for being such a great coach and mentor to all of us, and for taking the chance at a place like West Point and proving to everyone that we can win. We can have successful wrestlers. And, I think you laid the groundwork, and Kevin's doing a fantastic job. So just thank you for your leadership, and really great to see you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate Brian and Phil, you guys asking me to do this. And it is good to hear that. I'm sure not everyone had a great experience in the Army, but I had a lot of reservations about recruiting young kids into the Army, especially during a time of war. And so that weighed heavily on me a lot over the years. And so it's good to hear. I'm glad we didn't have any sort of tragic casualties within the team, which is good. And it's good to hear, for the most part, everyone had a great career or is having a great career in the Army. And so that brings me a lot of good relief, and I'm happy to hear. So, Brian, thanks for inviting me. You're doing a great job with this. I know you always joke about your 24 listeners or something like that, but you're doing a great service to the program, and these will go down into the archives forever. And so I think that's really great work that you're doing. So thank you for that.
Appreciate that, and I echo all the sentiments Phil said as well. I couldn't say it better myself.
Good deal.
Appreciate you hopping on, and it was good catching up.
Thanks, Coach.
Take care, guys.
Yep. See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to the BHAW Radio Show. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform. If there's something you'd like to hear on a future show, reach out to us on any of our social media, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Or you can reach us at email, bhaw.radio@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and as always, go Army, be Navy.